SpongeBob wasn't supposed to have expanding lore. It wasn't that kind of show initially. When it first aired, every episode felt like a weird little story. SpongeBob forgets how to tie his shoes. Patrick's just doing Patrick's thing. Squidward is just dying to have some peace and quiet. In fact, that was the charm of the Golden 3 seasons. Just pure cartoon chaos of life underwater. All it needed was SpongeBob being happy, Squidward being miserable, and a town full of fish pretending that any of this made sense. And then the first movie happened, and the show, it came back different. The colors were brighter, the pacing was faster, even the world suddenly felt bigger. But what's interesting is that somewhere in that transition, one episode quietly rewrote the entire playbook. One episode that most people barely talk about, but one that marks the moment that SpongeBob moved beyond being just a sitcom and grew into its own lore. And that episode might just be the most important one that SpongeBob ever had. But to understand it better, I have to take you guys back to 12th century Bikini Bottom. Back to a crowded arena, a bad idea, and a jousting collision that knocks SpongeBob and Patrick into an adventure. The adventure kicks off with SpongeBob and Patrick sprinting into a Renaissance fair called Medieval Moments.
Welcome to Medieval Moments. You're just 20 wizard's paces away from swords, sorcery, and bad hygiene.
They've got everything set up to resemble the medieval era, from historically accurate decorations, fake royalty, even an accurate castle guard.
Someday, but not today.
Unfortunately, by one spectacular misunderstanding, our boys volunteer for the royal joust.
Be watching the joust. You're in the joust.
Without any way to escape, they end up jousting each other and get launched into the sky. This is when things get weird, because somehow, some way, when they land, they magically wind up in medieval Bikini Bottom. And things here don't go well at all. They're immediately surrounded by the knights and get captured by force. Because falling from the sky apparently counts as a felony here. So they both get tossed in the dungeon, and here's where they first meet Squidly. As the name suggests, he's Squidward's ancestor. A doomed court fool who sings about getting the king so mad he had a stroke. This is also the moment Squidly curses his 7th great-grandson to suck at playing the clarinet.
If I never learn to play with ease, may mine own great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson be cursed tenfold.
This ironically explains why Squidward is still an underappreciated artist. It was a curse from Squidly. But at least Squidly is somewhat good at singing. Through his ballad, Squidly sings about the hospital and ye old bowling alley getting blasted by the dragon or giant jellyfish. Take your pick. It sounds silly until you realize we're hearing a 12th century version of Alaskan bullworm. All three of them then get called upstairs by King Krabs, where they are interrogated about where they came from. SpongeBob insists on their time traveler explanation, which the king obviously doesn't believe. And one bad ballad mocking the king, and you got this mess.
Send these slanderers to the guillotine.
SpongeBob and Patrick almost lose their heads if not for Princess Pearl pointing to a prophecy literally hanging above them.
How long has that been there?
The prophecy basically says that one day there will be a warrior that falls from the sky, who will swear their allegiance to the king and help to fight the Planktonomore. Unfortunately, the king's confusion is cleverly exploited by Planktonomore, who manages to break into the castle using the Jelly Dragon and captures Princess Pearl. With not many options left, the king finally chooses the two to rescue Pearl from Planktonomore and then finds a footnote saying he should have kicked them out. He does both.
We kick ourselves out of places.
Jokes aside, this is the show using The Chosen One as their main plot again, since they released a SpongeBob original movie not long before this episode, which is also about SpongeBob and Patrick trying to save Krabs from misery. On the road, they stop at a blacksmith. SpongeBob gets knight's armor, and more importantly, a jellyfish net. Seems obvious, right? You don't send a knight to fight an ancient jellyfish, you send a jellyfishing expert. Cut to the evil tower, Planktonomore is discussing his next step with his crystal ball wife, Karen.
Planktonomore, thou art cocky and overly confident with thyself.
Karen has been downgraded to orb form, but is still roasting him in this century. This marriage has survived time travel, which is impressive. Meanwhile, at the bridge, a towering dark night blocks the paths of our heroes, but it turns out it's medieval Sandy. SpongeBob goes straight to karate, absolutely clowns her in a second, and she goes,
By the hammer of Odin, this be a new fighting style mine eyes have not yet seen.
After a quick and fierce duel, SpongeBob delivers the final blow that ends the fight. By the way, did you guys catch that? Medieval Sandy calls SpongeBob's move a new style and asks to learn it.
And learn a trifle of that karate.
That's actually a paradox. The show flirted with the idea that SpongeBob might have founded karate in Bikini Bottom by teaching it backwards in time. Just like how Squidward paradoxically teaches prehistoric SpongeBob and Patrick to jellyfish in SB 129. They've started treating it like a recurring joke. And speaking of something familiar, this message is sponsored by Raycon. It's Raycon's anniversary and the essential open earbuds are stealing the spotlight because they're 30% off. I use these things daily. They become my edit day cheat code. They sit perfectly outside your ear canal so I can hear my audio and the world at the same time. Perfect for catching timeline notes and, yes, SpongeBob laughing in the background. They stay put too, since they're lightweight and secured by a multi-angular hook that rotates and locks in, so no need to wiggle them back in place when I'm walking, cleaning, or pretending to joust my laundry. They're also capable of multi-point connection, meaning I could bounce from laptop to phone without menu diving, and the battery holds up to 8 hours on a charge, plus 36 more from the case. And look, it's a premium sound without premium brand pricing, backed by millions of happy customers and a 30-day happiness guarantee. I use these, and unless you're living in Bikini Bottom, you should too. Hit the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/SpongeTruthsOpen to get 30% off the Essential Open Earbuds. Again, that's buyraycon.com/SpongeTruthsOpen. Ordering through my link will help me solve many more theories in the future, so thank you. Alright, ears open, karate's over, and we're back on the journey. The crew got the bright idea to infiltrate Planktonomor's fortress by weaponizing cowardice, crying for mercy while the guard plucks SpongeBob's eyelash. It's just stupid, but hey, it works. So, up the tower they go, climbing the countless steps. And when they finally get to the top, this is the very moment where Planktonomor truly shows his wicked, twisted, and evil character.
You truly are the nastiest wizard in all of Bikini Bottomshire. Prepare to be vanquished.
So the two start the final battle, and SpongeBob immediately steps on him by accident. Classic. But Planktonomor's trump card is the Jelly Dragon, who zaps everyone and corners our heroes. So SpongeBob reveals his own trump card, the Jellyfish Net. He quickly attacks the dragon, it almost holds, then it shreds. With nowhere to run, SpongeBob finally pulls out the lunch he'd packed earlier, Krabby Patties. The dragon sniffs, purrs, eats, and suddenly the dragon is his pet now.
Destroy them! Curses!
We cut to the celebration. Squidly sings about their achievement while everyone begs him to stop. Everyone's cheering about their success while King Krabs is feeding the jelly dragon patties.
I doth wonder if I couldst sell these.
This also marks the second paradox in the story, or almost a paradox. King Krabs is contemplating the possibility of making profit off of Krabby Patties, which he learns from SpongeBob. But sadly, it's not the real origin of the Krabby Patty. Friend or foe in Season 5 will lock that in later, but at least it reframes the patty as an idea that reincarnates until someone monetizes it. Then the story ends with a rock smash, a slapstick launch, and snap, SpongeBob wakes up at the fair like it was all just a dream. Except Patrick is still holding Squidly, squished like an accordion with a broken clarinet. So it's a dream? Time travel? Or SpongeBob Schrodinger? Anyway, I can already hear you guys saying, why is this episode so important anyways? They just recall some old gags, nothing serious. Well, because Dunces and Dragons is the first time SpongeBob trades the old sitcom reset for a refrain, where they kept the same melody but kept changing the verse. Or simply put, from this point on, Bikini Bottom actually remembers something, through roles, running gags, and ideas that come back wearing different hats. But how did one medieval detour give the show permission to get bigger? Canon, scale, and all. And what did it mean for the seasons that followed? You know what's funny? The more I rewatch this episode, the less I care whether it was a dream or actual time travel. What's more important is this episode subtly winking at us and saying, Don't sweat the mechanism, pay attention to the pattern. And once you actually see it that way, everything just clicks. What this episode teaches SpongeBob to do is take the movie's big plot devices, prophecies, quests, rescuing the princess, and run them through the familiar sitcom engine without losing the dumb, lovable rhythm underneath. As I said earlier, the first 3 seasons of SpongeBob only gave us mundane plot topics, like Krabs trying to force his employees to buy his cheap boots and squeaky boots, Sandy trying too hard to practice karate with SpongeBob in Karate Choppers, and Pearl needing a boy to accompany her on prom night in The Chaperone. Even when the show actually flirts with horror or mystery or even science fiction plots, they're usually revealed to be stupid gags or misunderstandings in the end. All the built-up horror in Graveyard Shift turns out to be a young kid trying to get a part-time job. And Nosferatu, no one actually gets killed in Nasty Patty. Everyone just laughs while drinking soda. Even in a bigger plot like SB-129, Squidward's time travel changes almost nothing other than that it paradoxically teaches some prehistoric sponge how to catch jellyfish. And then it never gets brought up again. They never make an episode plot that actually connects to the previous. Everyone just forgets and the world is reset by the next episode. That's the sitcom rules they've held tight since the very beginning. But as we all know, Hillenburg and the original team wanted to end SpongeBob with the 2004 movie. They thought it was the perfect plot to explain the final episode of SpongeBob. They made one big heroic tale for SpongeBob and Patrick, they saved Bikini Bottom from Plankton's control, everyone lives happily ever after, and credits roll. It was a perfect bow to the fans. That's the end they wanted. But Nickelodeon watched the numbers and said, well, people love to watch SpongeBob on a bigger scale, right? So now the question is, how do you come back from a finale, keep the sitcom soul, and still chase the bigger, connected plots that audiences clearly want? So with Hillenburg and most of the original team gone, they were willing to experiment. Season 4's Dunces and Dragons is their test kitchen, where they're trying to implement everything I said previously. Lots of their gags here subtly overshadow their life in regular Bikini Bottom by having the bigger stakes of saving the kingdom. A good example is that the prophecy literally hangs over the throne like a Krusty menu, and Krabs is still forgetting about it.
How long has that been there?
Does that ring a bell?
Your guarantee.
Oh, that.
The dragon in the story is just a giant jellyfish in cosplay. Maybe this jelly dragon is the ancestor of the king jellyfish that chases the jelly spotter. And both of them are tamed just by some lunch that SpongeBob made. And the jellyfish net? Can we talk about that? When SpongeBob pulls it out in a boss fight, for a second you think, of course that'll work. The only way to fight a jellyfish is to capture it with a net. And then it almost does, until it doesn't. This is kind of poetic, representing the old recipe of the pure sitcom energy of the pre-movie episodes might seem to work, but there's also the new scale of fans' expectations. So the show improvised. If a net can't catch the dragon, surely a Krabby Patty can tame it. Because if there's anything that can't be watered down by time, it's the personality of their main cast. No matter what kind of plot or troubles they get into, as long as their dynamics stay intact, the show will always be interesting because, surprise, that's why we love SpongeBob in the first place. SpongeBob in armor is still reckless optimism that refuses to see a monster. Patrick in a helmet is loyal chaos that will follow you into a disaster and call it friendship. Squidly is the cursed clarinet guy who's ready to diss you with any form of art. And yeah, he literally curses the bloodline, which is such a dark little joke you barely notice it. Krabs instantly thinks about sales the second a patty hits his tongue, because profit is his sixth sense. Planktonamore is a tiny ego in a tower, and Karen is still rolling her eyes through the orb. And Sandy? The moment she sees a move she's never seen, she wants to learn it. That one exchange, "This be a new fighting style," is the show planting a time loop grenade under karate. That whole subtle gag is the bigger shift they were trying to make. They wanted the post-movie SpongeBob to have the same scale as the movie while still keeping the regular show characters and dynamics. And once you give the show that kind of permission, of course the world gets bigger. You start seeing the effects immediately. We get lots of new plot lines with new characters just in season 4 alone. Krabs meeting with his old pals from his Navy days in Shell of a Man. Turns out Sandy does have a boss that keeps an eye on her invention's progress. And we get to see other octopuses like Squidward that actually succeed in their careers, like Kelpie G. But the clearest sign of these changes is that the writers stop pretending the past is gone and actually start using it as a prop for their next plot. Friend or Foe explains the true story behind Krabs and Plankton's friendship as kids, how the Krabby Patty was made in the first place, and would go on to fuel their rivalry in the future. I mean, if a patty can echo through the centuries, then yeah, Krabs and Plankton deserve an origin that actually sticks. The original Fry Cook treats the early Krusty Krab like actual history. Previous staff, rising sales, a younger Krabs, and a different Squidward rhythm. And you feel the change in how new episodes talk about the place. Even later, the show would go as big as Atlantis SquarePantis to prove this point. They can leave town and still feel like SpongeBob because the dynamics between roles also travel with them. So when people say post-movie SpongeBob is louder, sure. But I'd argue it's also braver and bolder exactly where it needs to be. If you felt that click during Dunces & Dragons, or even that, wait, this show is connecting things feeling, that's why this is the most important episode. It's their first sign of acceptance saying, yes, there's a lore for SpongeBob, and it's canon. Yes, we can build on what we've done, and still be funny tomorrow. So here's my line in the sand. If someone asks, when did SpongeBob change? I point to Dunces & Dragons. It's the single most important episode in that transition. And once you see that switch, you start spotting it everywhere. Little roasts that used to be throwaways suddenly matter. A running gag turns into history. And because Bikini Bottom can keep memories now, the biggest question in the fandom finally becomes fair game. You know, the theory that refuses to die. The skin theory. If Dunces & Dragons is the day SpongeBob earns canon, then my previous video is where I stress test it. I take some of the weirdest details the show can throw at me and follow it all the way until it's solved. We'll see you on the next dive.